Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the very last X Camera Talk of 2021. My name is Samantha Tai, and I am the Audience Relations and Communications Coordinator here at InterArts Matrix. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes? Okay. Before we continue with today's program, I would just like to do a quick land acknowledgement. So the land on which I'm speaking to you today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral Peoples. The city, now known as Kitchener, exists under the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which was originally signed by the Six Nations and the Dutch. But throughout history, other nations, including France and England, have also signed on to this treaty. It's made up of 3 tenets that characterize our collective responsibility. Take only what you need, leave enough for someone else, and keep the dish clean. As a settler on this land, I am also bound to this treaty, and I recognize that I have not always upheld my treaty duties. I also acknowledge that as the daughter of an immigrant, I have been afforded certain rights and opportunities that are not extended to people who are native to this land. Whether we are colonizers or have been colonized, it's important that we recognize the impact that colonization has had on all of us, because we are all responsible in creating a more just future for everyone. So welcome, everyone, and thank you again for taking time out of your day to join us. We are very, very excited to have Marie-Josée Chartier joining us this afternoon. Before we begin, I would just like to share a little bit about the X Camera series and how we got started. So X Camera began in the spring of 2019 when a group of people who were interested in the arts began gathering at Fresh Ground Cafe or the Common Studio in downtown Kitchener every Friday afternoon to hear a lecture by an interdisciplinary artist or professional. The lectures were followed by a question and answer period, and then time for people to stay in the cafe space, eat lunch together, continue their conversations, and build a community. This happened every Friday afternoon until March 2020, when our gatherings shifted online. It's in this spirit of supporting artists and building community that X Camera has continued virtually since then. Marie-Josée will begin her presentation shortly and will wrap up at about 10 to 2. As she's speaking, please feel free to type questions and comments in the chat. We would really love to know what you think. After the lecture, we will have a question and answer period focused on Marie-Josée's work, and then we will open up the room and promote you all to panelists so that you can turn on your camera and join into the conversation. Today, we are also joined by a guest host, Kate Camo-McHugh. So Kate is a multidisciplinary theater artist from Kitchener who is interested in artistically exploring concepts such as migration, belonging, and the intersections of art and care. Her recent career highlights include an artistic residency at the National Arts Center, workshopping a solo piece about her Japanese heritage at the Impact 21 Theater Festival, participating in Theater Direct's think tank Hack Lab, and performing object theater with Cosmic Fishing. Kate is currently rehearsing Shaded, a new work using shadow puppetry, and expanding her own artistic vision through the COVOX project, which is a part of our InterArts Matrix organization. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Kate.
Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here today to introduce Marie-Josée Chartier, an artist I have admired for many years. It's always special when you get a chance to converse with somebody that you have seen perform on stage and never imagined that you would be speaking to in real life, or at least through a computer screen a la pandemic. My first connection to Marie-Josée Chartier was when I was a dance student at Ryerson University in 2006. She was there as a guest choreographer, and I remember her larger-than-life presence and her ability to tell a story through dance and movement. So fast forward to this week, and I have to admit I was a little bit nervous to do this. But when we got on a Zoom call to prep for today, I was put at ease by her warmth and her sense of humor. So for those of you who are not familiar with Marie-Josée's illustrious career, let me introduce her to you. She is an artist whose work encompasses many different roles: choreographer, performer, director, vocalist, mentor, and teacher, and in many different areas of the arts, including dance and theater, music and opera, and multimedia. Born and raised in Montreal, she now lives in Toronto and spent almost 10 years with the company Dance Makers. Her choreographic repertoire has 35 different works, which she has shown both nationally and internationally. And in 2003, she started her own company, Chartier Danses, to support her creative ideas and large-scale productions. Today, she is going to be speaking to us about her piece, Petites, which some of you may have seen when she brought an iteration of it here to Kitchener in 2016. So welcome, Marie-Josée.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. That was really lovely. I would like to say hello to everybody. I would like to thank InterArts Matrix, Samantha, Kyle, Sheila, and Kate for inviting me and for taking care of this beautiful event. So yes, so we decided because the InterArts Matrix and the idea was to speak about something that is more current. And I haven't made a lot of big works in the last few years, but there is one ongoing work that started kind of in 2013, and that is called Petites. So the title of this talk is Petites, but then I was thinking it could be like the unfolding of Petites, because right until April 2021, it's still happening, and it might still happen in 2022. So there are a lot of sections to this production. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory, because as you all know, most of you are artists and people who are not in the arts. When we engage in something, there's always a creative process happening. And this Petite Danse kind of happened, I would say, by accident. In 2013, Soul Pepper, they had some awards for dance and multidisciplinary artists. And I was awarded the multidisciplinary artist from Soul Pepper. And that gave me a week in a studio. I had my fob key, and it was 24/7. I could go in a studio at the Young Center for the Performing Arts at the distillery. And most of you know how exciting it is to have a residency, because that means that's all you have to do for a week or 2 weeks, and you can really focus. So with my little fob key, I just thought, okay, let's do this. But at that time, I was not working on a particular piece. So I thought, wow, okay, I have a residency now, but I'm not developing a work at this very moment. Nevertheless, I thought, okay, let's see what happens. So I went into the room by myself, and I brought some videos of works in progress I had done in Berlin in the residency 2 years prior, and I hadn't even watched them. And I also brought a lot of CDs of contemporary music. I'm a great fan and admirer of Canadian composers in contemporary music. And you will see why in Petite Danse. And I just sat there in the room and kind of, okay, what happens now? So I just started watching the videos, and I started going through the CDs and listening to music. And actually what happened was that I was reminded of some pieces that I loved, one of them I had choreographed in 1998. And the one CD is called 25 Miniatures by Array Music. It was a contemporary music ensemble here in Toronto that's been around for almost 50 years now. And I was listening to the music, and the first piece I listened to again was John Mark Sherlock called Necklace. It's a 3.5-minute piece. I had choreographed, I had used it in a piece in 98, and I was just listening to it again. And what happened is I started to have many physical ideas and choreographic ideas while I was listening. I thought, that's interesting. So the week kind of evolved that way, just things were starting to percolate. And basically, almost at the end of the week, I thought, you know what? I'm going to make some short dances. And, up till now, I've always made really long, full-length works that were an hour or 90 minutes long. And I thought, okay, well, this is something to explore. And this is a real challenge. So in that fall, I started playing with that. And I asked Soul Pepper I said, I got this residency, but can I actually make a show at the Tank House? Which is not part of the deal, but I really convinced to take the Tank House and have 2 evenings. And I wanted to experiment with that idea. So basically, in January 2014, I managed to accumulate 11 short works. 4 of those were short films. And I gathered about 25 performers. And I had 11 students from Ryerson that I had worked with already before. And I showed them a work that I had made before. And so it was not really the structure of petites danses yet, which I will explain later because we'll watch some videos so then we can get a sense of what I'm talking about here. And in that January, I experimented with lighting with different pieces. But one piece in particular, and these are the first videos we will look at, was choreographed to In the High Branches by composer Linda Kathleen Smith, a composer and a good friend, and her music has been part of my work. This was a commission she received from the Toronto Evergreen Ensemble, and it's a piece for gamelan and string quartet. So already those two are, as Linda would say, like, how do I make those two live together in a piece? And it's a beautiful piece of music. And in fact, this piece of music, I have made 5 different choreographies to so far. And one day, actually, this is an aside, one day I would like to make an evening with just that piece of music because, we listen to pop music a lot and we get familiar, but with contemporary music, we might listen to it once. But the more I worked with the music, the more I discovered what was in it. So in that iteration at the Tank House, before it was called Petites Danses, it was called Cornucopia. I did In the High Branches for 11 dancers from Ryerson. I used that same music to make a quartet for 4 male dancers, mature male dancers, all in 50 years old and over. And I did one with my partner, the late Dan Wild, a dancer, where I wanted to experiment with having the same music, but almost in the dark. We had very little light. It was very mysterious, so that people's ears would be more to the music. And I had 2 shows every night. I invited 3 dance artists. They didn't know who they were going to be dancing with. They didn't know to which piece of music. And 15 minutes before the show, they would hear In the High Branches once. I had a lighting design that was already timed to the music. And every night we had this beautiful improvisation to the piece of music. It was amazing. So I will show you now in a second the piece that was made for 11 dancers. I had an opportunity to make that work for the festival Made Dance in Canada in the gorgeous Betty Oliphant Theatre, which is a very, very big theatre. And I decided to, because that work had started with graduating students, I decided to continue. So I had 17 dancers, mostly from Ryerson and some students from the School of Toronto Dance Theatre. And this was presented. So you will see a 3.5-minute edited version. And you get to see the beginning and the end. And you'll notice the music kind of weaves in and out because it's an edit. And then we'll watch the companion piece to this. So Kyle, we could start the Crépuscule. It's called Crépuscule to Linda Smith's music In the High Branches. Thank you, Kyle. I don't know if you recognize some of your pals at Ryerson there. It was, I'd like to say what I loved about working with the graduating students, and I love contemporary music so much, and I just want to find a way sometimes to initiate them to really listen and to be part of it. And one of my small victories is not just with emerging dancers, but is, this type of music, you're not going on melody, you're not counting, there's repeated patterns. But I just love when I could feel they had this music in their bodies, because there's some very tricky, what we'd say, cues, when they all suspend for a second. It's a silence that happens without notice, but they could feel it. And I just love when they say, oh, we love this music, because I could start to feel as we were, what's the word? Deceptively difficult to dance. Because it doesn't, it's not big lifts and throwing all over the place, but there's a real delicatesse in the gesture it's kind of tricky to do. But also, they had to work 17, feeling each other's timing and feeling where the music was going. So this piece of music in the high branches, in this work, I'm probably going to state the obvious, but in that piece, there's a processional kind of aspect to it. There's kind of a poetic kind of feel. So in that choreography, as you remember, I said I did 5 different pieces to this music. I explored the quiet procession and the coming together, except when they're spinning, that's when the strings are going a little bit like one after the other. Now we're going to watch something that I find is quite contrasting, is for the 4 men. And the version you will see now, we did in Ottawa Dance Directive at Arts Court a few years afterwards. And I was sharing the program. So I did this quartet of men, and I did also my own version of In the High Branches as a solo. But we won't see that. I will show you the piece with the 4 men. And again, these are really great colleagues of mine. And you will see it has I think it does have a completely different influence with the music and the movement. So, Kyle, we could see the next quatuor, Étude pour quatuor. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. It's always a bit tricky to show excerpts, but hopefully, it gives an idea. And I know the lighting, it's in some moments is dark, but it's also, made for the theater. So I apologize if sometimes it's a bit hard to see everything. I'm not going to comment on my own work, but you probably noticed some similarities of the breath at the beginning. We had the breath with the 17 dancers. You had the breath of the 4-man, and my solo also started as a solo figure in the corner with breath. So there are things that weave because, the music inspires me to do so. For example, there's a moment of suspension with the Ryerson dancers where they all are going into a gesture that's very distinct and very in unison. And in this piece, for example, that moment is Daryl just stopping and it's just his one arm moving. So this is what I love about pieces of music like this. It just give me so much space. There's a lot of space and I can really get inside. And every time I hear the music again, I have these, and sometimes they're beautiful accidents, right? So like when I did choreograph the piece for the men, I said, well, let's run it with music and let's just see where things land. And then we start building also musical cues. So it's just, I love also, as in any art form, these beautiful accidents. Okay, so these were two examples back to back of the earlier works. So then after this January 2014, when I first explored this, there was a grant at Toronto Arts Council, a new pilot project grant offered to people like me who like to do projects on a long-term basis. And I was very clear that I wanted to continue exploring this idea. So that's where petite danse, the whole structure of petite danse was kind of created. And luckily, I did get the grant, and it led me to explore over a period of 3 years, on and off, exploring this idea. So I did mention earlier that I used to do longer works, and doing shorter works was a real challenge, and it continues to be a challenge after all this time. So the proposal I made was I gave myself a very strict structure because I knew that I could easily get lost in so many ideas. So basically, the full program of petite danse is 8 works. And in the first half of the show, you have an intermission. It's about 50 minutes. You get 4 pieces of dance, and you hear each piece of music once. So I have 4 pieces of music and 8 dances. After intermission, you hear the same pieces of music again with different dances. So not quite like I showed you just now, back to back, you kind of go, oh yes, it's the same music. So what is interesting is, for example, in the first half, I also ended up having uneven numbers: solo, trio, quintet, and septet, 1, 3, 5, 7 performers. And in the second half were even numbers. That's kind of how it happened: 2, 4, 6, 8. I had many choices of music, and I finally decided on a particular choice for my first iteration of petite danse. And so it's a collection, I would say, and it's been described as a collection of short stories. And so each one can be pulled out, and some people have used them in their repertoire. Each one could be on its own, but as a book of short stories, you're satisfied when you finish your short story, but they all live within a world. My world, this world, would be that you see the same performers that keep coming back, and each dancer will do about, and I have actors also in the production, they'll do 2 or 3 dances. So you see them coming back in different ways. You have the feeling of these kind of music that keep coming back, although most people don't notice. And this is what is really, really fascinating to me. And so basically I built this program. And so for this full program, there's a piece by James Tenney called Septet, which is for 6 electric guitars and electric bass. And to that piece, I choreographed a duo and a trio. And a piece of Linda Smith, a different piece called Nocturne and Chorales. And that's for the quintet of women and the sextet. You will see sextet, 6 different people on a canvas. A piece by Rodney Sharman called After Truth was a piece that was never really performed, that he recorded in 81. We made a new recording for flute and percussion. And in this next video, you will see a quartet all dressed in white. And the pairing piece of that is 7 Men, is the piece with plastic and sheets. They're edited, so you'll get just a glimpse of each piece. And for me, what's important is my love of the contemporary visual arts. And most of my work have had design, and they all came from inspiration from contemporary artists. And I couldn't really let go of the visual. So I wanted each world to be its own narrative, to be its own visual, emotional, narrative world, auditory world, and casting as well. So, let's see what you notice. Maybe we can talk about it in the Q&A after. So Kyle, we'll watch. This is the Winnipeg edition in 2017. And I created this with all Winnipeg professional dancers, some emerging dancers, and 4 or 5 actors that were part of the production. Thank you, Kyle. It's a little bit jarring watching the pieces like this. I mean, this is all we can do right now. Just keep in mind that each piece is about 10 minutes. And one thing to realize, putting a program like this, you notice like there was an intensity of colors of the red, and there's some metal pieces, and there's a canvas on the floor. There's the men who have to sit down in the dark with their sheets and plastic. And so these transitions are as choreographed as the pieces, so that the audience is also between pieces, they see the transformation of the stage, but it has to be done in a very fluid way. So there were many things to keep in mind in doing 8 pieces. First of all, each dancer or actor is in 2 or 3 different pieces. So I had to make sure that in the program, they didn't do all their 3 pieces in a row. Taking into account the visual, the energy of each piece, right? The dynamic, what is best before or after. So the fluidity of it and the contrast of it all. And that's how it turned out to be. It worked out like uneven and even numbers. Also, there was a separation by intermission. And I'll just say this, whenever we presented this in all the different places, some places wanted me to talk before the show. And I would just tell people, well, you'll notice the music comes back and it's in the program. And in the post-show chat, and most people didn't even notice. And that's fascinating to me. I think it's a real interesting thesis of neurology because our world is so visual for people, obviously, who can see. It's so visual. And I think that the visual and the narrative takes over. And what I've also heard is they say, well, I didn't really notice, but I had a sense of familiarity. So I think that somehow subconsciously the music made its way in the people's bodies so that when they watched the next piece, there was something familiar about it. So I think that's very interesting. So, and I'm not sure we can talk about this after. So moving on to the last video I want to show. So casting these pieces. I started with the work with certain artists. For example, I did the first duet with certain artists. I did the first trio with certain artists from Toronto and Peterborough. Now, when you take a piece like that, and I knew this would be my challenge, because all the other works I've ever made, I was extremely specific about the casting, like very specific. And in this, I had to let go of a lot of things. I had to let go of pieces that were short. I had to let go of who will be dancing the piece, how will it transform? And so these were all challenges that I gave myself. And it was interesting. For example, the duet, I've had 3 different couples do it so far. And it's great for me because I have a year or 2 and then I revisit. But I revisit with very different people who have very different questions about the piece. And I've made some changes. The trio, for example, in Red, the piece in Red, the first version was with 2 men and 1 woman of quite a great maturity as professional dancers. But then I would do with people that are younger, who need a bit more coaching. And then suddenly it was 2 older people, a younger person. Suddenly the relationship, people say, well, it looked like a parent and the child, as before it would look like 3 adults having. So it's just that is very, very, it shifts drastically. The piece you just saw with all the 4 in white, this was quite a young cast in Winnipeg. And suddenly you can't really tell from the excerpt, but in the piece with Rodney's piece, it took on a lot of humor. There were a lot of little whimsical and little naughty things going on, but there was that youth that was bubbling. When I first did it was with 4 mature dancers, and it suddenly looked more like a party's gone wrong. Just because of, so the choreography stays the same. But just because of the age and the way people dance, and just visually, we connect with this. Like right away, it gave a completely different narrative. So some pieces don't change very much. Obviously, the piece with the 7 men, but it's a great chance for me to revisit. So now for the last, I think I've got to move on. The last piece of video. is what I did this year in Halifax. And here's a little COVID story. Not that we need more of them, but I had a tour of 5 maritime cities planned for the fall of 2020. And it was going to be the largest petite danse experiment to date, where and we worked on this for 4 years. We had performers, dancers, and actors from Fredericton, from St. John, New Brunswick, and from Halifax. And the idea was that over a period of time, we would rehearse in different cities and have, let's say, in a piece with 6 dancers, we'd have 3 from Halifax. There was a real beautiful mashup of all these artists and go on the road. COVID happened, everything got canceled. Luckily, Motion Dance in Halifax said, well, we can produce a Halifax version. So instead of presenting all 8 works, we presented 5 works. So 4 had the musical pairings, and they asked me to do a new work, which stands a bit outside of petite danse, but is still a short work. And I don't know what kind of miracle happened, but we were there in April 2021, before the vaccine, and we were in a bubble with 11 interpreters, 11 performers. We did 3 live shows at Alderney Theatre in front of an audience. We had a live stream. Nobody got sick. It was an amazing experience. So again, I remounted the duet on a different couple, the trio. I made a new solo. So the new solo was on Rodney Sharman's music, which is the one with flute and percussion that you just saw, the quartet and the 7 men under the plastic. I made a new solo to this piece. So this is 3 choreography to this music. And we probably will run out of time, so I won't show the new work, but I'll show an excerpt of those 4 pieces, and then you'll see similarities again. So you have just seen, again, some of the same pieces with a different casting, and how some of those works have transformed just by discussion with the casting and revisiting once again. Yeah, I mean, I can keep talking, but I would prefer to hear people or questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was so wonderful to see the different iterations and the different casting. I'm really curious. You mentioned that some of the performers are dancers and some of the performers are actually actors and yes, probably don't have dance training. No. So how does that change the process in the studio?
Well, when I originally made the version Toronto-Peterborough, Bill Kimball presented Public Energy, asked me if I could involve the community in the show. And there's a group called Old Man Dancing, a group I've worked with, and they perform in Kitchener. And 4 of them were part of the work, and they ended up in the piece Under the Plastic with the dancers. At the time, the duet was performed by a male dancer. But when I went to Winnipeg, the one that's performing with is Arnie McPherson, who's a well-known actor in the city who has a lot of actors have a lot of physical theater background. And I also was craving to have something a body that's different and just a different kind of weight and maturity. And that couple is a little bit older. They have kids. And I think it gave a completely different vibe. And I also revisited some of the movement. And Arnie danced in the piece with the 7 men in Winnipeg. There's 4 professional actors that were part of that. And in Halifax in 2019, I was there to start auditioning for Petites Danses. And I had 2 full days with about 10 actors, 10 male actors, because I wanted some of them to be, if some of them were better with, more trained in movement. So the duet you saw with Matthew, that's an actor, and the man under the plastic are actors. And the one in the trio is was actually a hip hop dancer who didn't have a lot of training in contemporary dance. So that required a little bit of coaching in order to do the piece. But I also used his ability in hip hop to enhance one of the floor sections. So I also wanted to. So these are the interesting challenges, right? Because, I work with the community there they have fabulous, the woman who danced on the canvas is an incredible solo dancer who worked with Au Vertigo. And anyway, so it's just revisiting and seeing how the work transforms.
Was that the woman who was in the rectangle doing the gestures? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Oh,
and this is all pre-COVID. Everybody said this is such a COVID piece trapped in a room, but this was done before. The same with the plastic and the sheet. It's interesting how, in a particular context, things take their own meaning, really.
Yeah. When you're in a 2-day audition process, what are some qualities that you look for in your actors or your dancer?
It's really rare I audition. I don't like auditioning, but because I didn't know the community of actors there, so I did some physical training with the man. I did some voice, I wanted everybody to be really comfortable. And basically, I worked a little bit with the elements of that piece, just to see the piece with the plastic and the sheets is deceptively very difficult to perform.
I believe it.
It's super specific to the music, and the body underneath has to be very specific, like they have to have their backs like this, the head hidden, and you just see the arms, and there's no counts. You hear that music. It's like, where are we in the music? So, and they're isolated. They don't see each other. They're completely isolated. It's very challenging to do. So I did a little bit of it with the men there, and I could tell for some of them where it was going to be very tricky. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the time, we just did improvisation. I gave them some specific, and sometimes I would have the women from the company work with them just to see their energy and just see how so it could be as simple as walking across the room, as doing things in the video from Winnipeg. I don't know if you remember the figures all in black on the canvas, kind of like all going at each other.
Oh yeah.
I did that with about 8 of these men, and a lot of them were really tall and big, and it was actually that piece I could do again with that group because it suddenly took on a whole other energy. It was great to watch. It was like almost like a wrestling match, but it had a very different. So yeah, I do some really simple things that tells me a lot about the performer, about how they're able to just be there. And then also physically, how they can improvise, their sensibility with each other also, as improv in any discipline, in theater and music, it's about listening, how they listen, and how they absorb and how sensitive So that's kind of what I did over those 2 days. But I really wanted to be fun also and to get to know them.
Very nice. You referenced a lot of different composers and pieces during your talk, and I'm wondering, do you usually find music and think, oh, I must create to this? Or sometimes do you work with a composer together?
All of it, all of it. So
Okay.
I've commissioned works before. So I invited, when I did 51 Pieces of Silver for Dance Makers, I commissioned Henry Kohajek to create the work with me. He had written a beautiful piece that was called Chorale, a 15-minute piece for solo violin and brass ensemble. And because these are all composers I know and they're all living composers, I can also ask them permission for certain things. And I said, would you be willing to deconstruct this 15-minute piece? And we added metal sounds. And then we worked very closely for this 1 hour work. Some of those pieces are pieces I'm familiar with. And yes, just as you said, I did a solo in 2000 and I was just improvising in the studio. And there was this piece by Alison Cameron that she did as a young composer. And I improvised to it and it was perfect. I went, okay, this is the music for this state, my physical and mental and emotional state. So sometimes it clicks. But the piece by Rodney, Flute and Percussion, that we heard a few times today, I have to say this piece I picked, but it's a piece that irritated me. And I love Rodney and I love all his music and I'm not fond of flute. What I mean by that, it's very unsettling. The music is unsettling. It starts unsettling and it just keeps going like this. And I thought, wow, there is something there. Like there is something unsettling. So all three pieces that I made to that are unsettled. I mean, that's the word I can think of. And they're amazing musicians, Baroque flute and percussion, but it's just like the sounds, they just kind of make me go, oh, and I thought, okay, the more reason I should really investigate. Anyway,
you challenged yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm curious, what is your day-to-day artistic practice like? Do you like dance class?
People might be very, very deceived. I don't really have anything irregular at all. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've been doing this for 40 years, but I couldn't say I have a daily practice, honestly. It varies. If I'm working, for me, I have to be working on something, like something that I know will see the day. I admire people who have a practice on their own to just keep creating. And sometimes I have friends who never exhibited, but they paint every day. I love that. I wish I was like that, but it's just not in me. For me, I get excited about if I'm working on something with people that's going to be performed that I could share. On my own is very difficult. I've created solos for myself and it was always, I'm proud of them. I love them, but it was very, very hard. So I like to have my morning. I love to listen to Radio-Canada. I don't even take class all the time, although I love to, and it's been very difficult. So I don't even train regularly. I'm lucky to have a very resilient body. So I love teaching or going to class and just being physical for a reason. It's almost like I need a motivation for it. Yeah. And my practice would be, I love museums and art galleries, I think more than anything else, contemporary art. So this is when I travel a lot, not lately, but this is the first thing I do. I go to art galleries and museums. I go to concerts, of course. At home, I rarely listen to music. I will only listen to music if I'm working on a piece. It's very interesting. I just don't want music at home very much. I like Radio-Canada, and to relax, I like television. I don't know. But it's all over the place. It's all over the place. And I've accepted that. So when I travel by train in Europe a lot, then I do write a little bit more. I have spurts, bursts of moments where I'm going to write. And then I won't write for months. And then I'm going to write again or make drawings when I'm working on a new piece. So it's it varies a lot. And when I'm directing opera, that's a whole other process. I have to do my homework, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I don't have any routine.
No,
but that's all my practice, right? It's all of it.
Absolutely.
I take it in from people I love, people, friends. Friendship is very important to me. So I have quite a social life, and I love to see my friends. That inspires me.
That's one. Thank you for sharing. I have been trying to create a daily practice for myself, and I'm like very much struggling. So it's wonderful to hear that you have such a rich artistic life, and yet you don't take dance class every day. So
no,
thank you.
Or even practice at home something, or write every day. But I think we're always thinking, right? It's also in our heads. When I go for long walks, or I love traveling on the train for this, like the train, just if I'm on the train, I'm just get flooded by a lot of ideas. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Maybe I can ask one more question, and then we can open it up to some other participants. So sometimes I have an idea and I'll get into the studio, and honestly, it's like hitting a wall. I don't know. I have an idea, but I don't even know how to get started. And I'm wondering if you can offer any advice to other artists who sometimes go through the same thing.
You mean particularly for dance, or for...
Well, for dance, or for me, it's for dance, but for anything really.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked alone quite a bit, but not as much as I've worked with people. So there's a difference there right away, right? So if I go in the studio with people, well, they're there. You booked a studio, you're paying them, you better get going with something, right?
Yes.
So I will plan something to do before I get in the studio, and then we experiment. If I go alone, I've had all kinds. Again, it's never the same. It's never the same. And I think we should never expect that it's going to be the same. That's what I've accepted. I think that each project and each idea have, whether it's dance or with an actor or with musicians, and I was part of the collective Urge for 15 years. It's a multidisciplinary collective where we all had the voice, extended vocal work. And this is where we had to create what our creative process was going to be. And every time we did a new production, we kind of had to rethink what that was. And each project, like Petite Danse, was a different process, right? I went in with dancers. Sometimes I didn't know, just to experiment. If I go alone and I feel that I'm really stuck, and there's been time where I just lay on the floor and did nothing for 2 hours. It's frustrating, but if I felt like I needed an external kind of, if I have a seed of an idea, if it's an image, a lot of times from the visual art, I will just start improvising. I put the camera on and I try to be gentle with myself. I just start to move and I'm going to look at it. I rarely work from A to Z. I just start unpacking what might be there. If there was a very hard time for me at some point in my life, and I went in the studio 2 hours a day for 2 months because I had to put a piece together for March 2020. And one day I brought, and this was an interesting trick, a piece of music that I would never choreograph to. Now I love this piece of music, but then it was, it's Glenn Branca. He does these symphonies for electric guitars. I can stand electric guitar now and I actually love it, but then I couldn't stand it. So this symphony number 3, which is, I don't know how many electric guitars, wall to wall sound. So I did something that was the opposite. I didn't indulge in the kind of stuff that I really like because I knew I would move in the same way. So basically, I remember I put this piece of music and it made me move in a very different way. And I recorded it on video. Then when I watched it, I shut down the sound. And I was watching what I was doing. I thought, wow, this is This is unusual, right? So I provoked something with a different piece of music. You could provoke it with a piece of text. You could provoke it with a drawing. And you could also, sometimes it's to give yourself a very, very, very simple task. I'm just going to do this for 20 minutes. I'm just going to do this one thing for 20 minutes. So there's no recipe. There's no recipe. The other thing is, if you've been going at it for a while, it's really nice sometimes to bring a friend or a colleague in the room. Just to have someone in the room. So not necessarily, it doesn't have to be your rehearsal person. It has to be an assistant or a mentor. It could be someone you know well that you trust, and someone that has a generous attitude. And it could just be in the room with you. And maybe you can ask them to throw words at you, and then you just go. Or you do something and you get their impression of what you've done without letting you veer off from what maybe you want to explore, unless you really want to be taken in different ways. So, there's lots of different ways. I mean, a lot of them I discovered on my own, but I know there are books out there that can help you, help you. I can't think of them right now, but I'm very self-taught. So it's over years and time and just exploration and trying things.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. I will try that with the music. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good one. You put something that is your last thing on your list and see what happens.